What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me as always. Welcome to day 2 of the Camp Crystal Lake tour. Let's continue this series review with Friday the 13th.
Number 2.
Thanks to Dr. Evil. But actually, it's Friday the 13th.
All right, zip it.
No, I was just trying to explain to them how it's not actually number 2. It's Friday the 13th.
Zip.
All right, without further ado, Friday the 13th, Part 2. So aside from a little Alice scene that we get at the beginning of this movie, Friday the 13th Part 2 takes place 4 to 5 years after the events of the original. Now I say 4 to 5 years because the timeline in these movies are so bad. Like seriously, go look it up. The continuity is terrible. This movie takes place 4 to 5 years after the events of the original Friday the 13th, and it all pretty much stems from the fact that people are on Jason's property. Like, I just don't understand the teenagers in these movies. He's not like a killer that haunts your dreams and he's unavoidable. Literally, all you have to do is camp anywhere else in New Jersey. This is, of course, the debut of Jason, and he definitely makes a strong first impression, both with his first kill and this entry as a whole. I'm definitely going to say that this is one of the stronger entries in the entire franchise, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that, as most Friday fans agree that this one holds up pretty well. Now, it does take a while to get going at the beginning, just because we have that scene that pretty much recaps the events of the first movie, where Alice is rolling around in her bed with this nightmare sequence, which I get what they were trying to do, but A, this movie came out only a year later, so it's not like we had a long gap where people forgot what happened. And B, it just takes so long. I feel like they could have cut this scene almost entirely. But we get the scene with her rolling around in bed, and when she finally wakes up and heads to the fridge, pun intended, she opens it and finds, well, turns out Jason has a sense of humor, and he put his mom's head in there. So, when Alice sees that and starts panicking, like you do when you have a head in your fridge.
This guy's got any beer in his fridge? Ah! No! There's a bunch of severed heads.
We get this gnarly kill where Jason comes up behind her and just takes that ice pick and just drives it right through her temple. Great first kill of the movie. Sets the tone for a strong entry. It was definitely a bold move, in my opinion, to kill off the final girl of the first movie. So many horror franchises. You have Laurie Strode. You have Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street. Although she's not the main girl going forward, you do get a few more appearances by her throughout the franchise. You get Sidney Prescott from the Scream movies. So killing off Alice in the opening scene of your sequel was definitely a bold move. But I think it worked well for the shock factor alone. I can't imagine a lot of people were expecting Alice to die. This movie had the guts to do what even Halloween sequel couldn't, kill off the final girl of the first movie. But, in defense of Halloween, Laurie Strode, of course, went on to become horror royalty. And those are levels that I just don't think Alice ever would have reached. Now, although the characters in this movie are definitely an improvement from Part 1, they're still largely forgettable, in my opinion, until we get the fashionably late Ginny. Amy Steele is awesome as our final girl in Part 2. In my opinion, she's one of, if not the best final girls of the entire franchise, as she has everything you want with a final girl. She's smart, she's brave, she's resourceful, and for bonus points, she even gets to use some of that child psychology she's been studying in the scene where When she's trapped in Jason's shack, she puts on his mom's sweater and tricks Jason into thinking that she's his mother, in what is undoubtedly one of the best scenes of the entire Friday the 13th franchise.
Jason! It's all done, Jason. You've done your job well, and Mommy is pleased. That's a good boy.
Yeah, I feel like this movie improves largely on everything the first one did. They kind of learned their lessons on a few of the issues they had from the first movie. You know, you get a cast that, while still not great, is a lot easier to watch on camera, better acting, a little bit better chemistry between them. You have a final girl who is miles ahead of her predecessor, Ginny compared to Alice. And then you have that atmosphere that was good in the first movie, even a little bit better in this one, where you're introduced to Packanack Lodge, you get Jason's shack, and lastly, of course, we're introduced to a future horror icon and the scariest mama's boy in cinema history, up there with Bobby Boucher.
Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Mama's right. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
Now, even though I love the hell out of this movie, no movie in the Friday series is perfect. So with that being said, let's jump into a few of the negatives we have here. One thing that the first movie did do better is the kills. And, you know, a large part of that, I believe, is due to the absence here of Tom Savini. He left the series after the first movie and would only return for part 4. His absence is definitely felt, in my opinion, as we don't get nearly the same effects that we had from the first movie. This is actually the lowest death count in the entire franchise, with only 9 kills. Which, in itself, isn't a problem, but if you're only going to have 9 kills, you should have a few more memorable ones. And one of the deaths is Crazy Ralph. You all know how I feel about Crazy Ralph. Seriously, Jason, what the hell did this guy do to you? That being said, you still do get a few iconic moments here and a few iconic kills. You, of course, have the infamous Mark kill, where the machete just gets drove into his head and he rolls down what seems like 1,000 stairs that come out of nowhere. It almost becomes like this unintentional humor moment. Just like, how does that wheelchair not tip over? And then, of course, you get the spear kill that Jason gets, a 2-for-1. Yeah, 2 bodies with 1 single spear. What an efficient killer. And my second negative with this movie is, again, pacing. This is going to be a broken record kind of complaint about this series. You're probably going to hear this in about 8 or 9 entries, as I really feel like only a handful of these movies really nailed the pacing. My problems in this movie are, as I already briefly talked about, that painful intro with Alice rolling around in bed, the recap of the first movie that I don't really think was necessary. Kind of slowed down the beginning of this movie. And then after that first kill with Jason using the ice pick on Alice, you get like a good 20-25 minute gap where we're being introduced to the new characters, but there's nothing really happening. Again, this isn't something I hold personally against this entry, as it's an issue most of these movies have. So that's just a kind of general complaint. My biggest gripe with this entry is Jason himself. Now this Jason never really did it for me. He's one of, if not my least favorite Jason of the entire series. You know, to me, he's clumsy. He's not big or intimidating like some of the future portrayals. And the pillowcase, The sackhead Jason I was never a fan of that look. He doesn't intimidate me. You know, like when I watched part 3, Richard Brooker really brought that character to life and showed me how terrifying Jason can be. And when I'm watching a Friday the 13th movie, I want to be scared. And part 2, Sackhead Jason, just never did that for me. He was kind of more of a laugh than he was a scare, because he's just so clumsy. Now, I love the Sackhead look in the 2009 remake. That is a great look for Jason in that movie, with it just covering his whole face, no openings for his eyes, just looks like a cloth like wrapped around his head. That is a great look. I would say I even prefer that to the mask he finds in the remake. But I also feel like that is in large part due to the portrayal of Jason by Derek Mears in that movie. Derek Mears is an excellent Jason in my opinion. He brings that character a whole new level of horrifying. That dude haunts my dreams like I'm Alice. Overall, you can't go wrong with this entry. It still holds up as one of the best in the entire Friday franchise. It builds on everything the first movie did, kind of turns it all up to 11, and it's one of those rare moments in cinema where the sequel is actually better than the original. So, if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen this movie, definitely give Friday the 13th Part 2 a watch. And until next time, we'll see you guys for Part 3.